All right, I think we're ready to get started on the next session. We're going to change it up a little bit. We're not doing a PowerPoint presentation for this session. It's a little bit more of a storytelling scenario. So I'll give you a little bit of background quickly on myself, and then I'm going to share some experiences at my institution. So my name is Marlene Scheel. I'm the manager of alumni advancement at the University of Guelph-Humber. Quick scenario of my background: I've worked in higher education and/or healthcare fundraising and development for a number of years. I just joined the University of Guelph-Humber in January, so new role for myself at this institution and new role for the institution. Lori, our coordinator, is here today, and she's been involved for the last few years at the University of Guelph-Humber, but we're really trying to build and expand the alumni portfolio, if you will. So I'll just give you a quick synopsis of the University of Guelph-Humber. How many people have heard of our institution before? Great. Is that just because I'm on the agenda? Okay. How about prior to seeing the agenda?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's great. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what the institution is, because it is kind of a unique scenario. So we're basically a collaborative effort between the University of Guelph and Humber College. Next year, 2016, will actually be the first year that we've had grads out for 10 years. So all of our alum are young alums, or under the 10-year mark at the present time. So it's a very unique and specific concentration of efforts with our alumni. So it may or may not apply to bigger institutions, but I think if you hone in on what we've been able to experience and accomplish, that there are some takeaways there, even for bigger institutions and bigger portfolios, if you will, of all ages of alumni. But when we're looking specifically at our catchment group with respect to the University of Guelph-Humber, we're looking at a dual degree diploma scenario. And I say it's a collaborative effort. So in 4 years, you cross the stage with a university degree from the University of Guelph and a diploma from Humber College. So I'm told there is a similar scenario out in BC, but otherwise we are the only example of this, certainly in Ontario, and perhaps one of two in Canada. So needless to say, very concentrated curriculum, very focused group of students when they're on campus, very driven, very specific as to why they're there. I'm dating myself when I nostalgically say that I went to university to open my mind and expand my horizons and all those wonderful things that I still think are fantastic. But flash forward to today in our reality of the job market, many times a lot of these students are looking at a very focused education and want to be driven in that career mode, which has its pros and cons, and that's, I think, a whole other seminar. But because of our unique scenario, I think a large percentage of our students are very focused. They don't sort of come in and find their way or change programs or, I'll start up general arts and I'll leave my way and find out what it is I'm interested in, because our curriculum is so tight for those dual credentials. So that's just a little bit of background. Small school, as Lori mentioned, we graduate under 1,000 students each year. Our entire catchment base of alumni right now are sitting around the 6,000 mark. So again, very, very tailored. Very close-knit, as I mentioned, very career-focused. Very tight program because of that, not only because of that dual degree diploma, but also there is a placement component in all 7 of our programs. So throughout, and some of the programs vary, but throughout their 4 years, they, as part of their curriculum, must have a placement component. So again, very career-driven, very specific, and focused on what it is to want to accomplish. So I just wanted to give you that bit of background before I get into what I'm talking about today, which is basically how to book, and you can call it a meeting, a call, or a visit. I think in our world, those words are very interchangeable depending on what it is we're trying to accomplish. But I'm going to just talk about how to book a call. And when I say a call, I'm not talking about just a phone call. And obviously, as we know with young alums, it isn't necessarily a phone call that you make to book the call and visit. So that's the other challenge in this. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of history of what I've experienced in coming into Guelph-Humber since joining in January. Laura's done a terrific job of setting the stage and building that momentum over the years. And then it was thought, as we build towards that 10-year reunion and celebration next year, that we really need to build the momentum and drive it forward. So when I came in, I was dealing with obviously a number of constituents that were already somewhat connected to the university, not necessarily from a monetary perspective, but as far as volunteering or getting involved in something on campus, or perhaps in an anecdotal way, serving as a mentor. There were bits and pieces of programs that were there and that were established and certainly active. My role was to then come in and I sort of started with those folks that were somewhat connected and grab hold of them, introduce myself. I mean, it was a good opportunity, quite frankly, with me being new, that was sort of my excuse for the call or the email or however it was I was reaching out to them. I'm new, I hear you've been involved, I hear you're very successful and where you are at now in your life and your career planning. Love to meet with you, introduce myself, buy a coffee, and hear your story. It was that simple. And because our folks were still quite young, still very connected, generally speaking, hadn't necessarily been out very long, certainly under 10 years, there was a great success rate. And as I say, a number of the key folks that I started with and contacting had already been involved with something on campus. Came back to give a talk in the classroom, sat on a judging panel, volunteered for something, perhaps came to a reunion in the past. So I was lucky, again, we're a close-knit shop and institution, so I started reaching out to the various key internal constituents and contacts and learned very quickly what they did and how they could feed information to me. So if the information wasn't coming directly from the alumni to our office, that's the ultimate, they contact us directly to tell us their wonderful news, then perhaps it was through student services, career services, academic services, program heads, that's our equivalent to a dean. Again, because they're so close-knit, they would have known all of these people quite personally, really, when they were on campus as students. So they may have reached out, or these folks may have reached out to them to ask them to come back and get involved in something. So I immediately started gathering lists and lists of these types of individuals because they were warm bodies, quite frankly. They were not looked at then as a cold call. So I could start with them, introduce myself, say, I've heard this much about you, or thank them for their involvement. Can we meet and can I hear more? And I have to say, we were very successful in our close rate on those appointments because they're eager to share their story. They're eager, they're excited because again, they haven't been out too long. They realize that their education has in some way led them to where they are today. So they're open to the concept of meeting. And again, it's feeling through the scenario so that it's not immediately going for an ask. You do have a monetary goal attached to your portfolio. It's, let's not skip the discovery, identification, cultivation stages of life and go straight for solicitation. Obviously, you have to manage that and monitor that and move forward in a sophisticated, planned, strategic approach. But it was a great opportunity to reach out to them. And I guess I'm sort of like Aaron here, very organized, very determined that this is what I want to see happen. So in the few people that said, oh, I don't think I have time for that, or again, keep in mind that if they're young alums, they may be in a junior position, so they can't take an hour and a half lunch, or go for a coffee break in the middle of the day, or what have you. I'll say, I'm happy to be downtown, can I meet for coffee at 10? Well, they don't get a coffee hour, perhaps in their role. So it was being flexible, see them after hours. I remember one person saying, oh, I'd love to meet with you, but like I work 9 to 5, I can't get away. And I thought, well, you have to eat lunch. Can I buy you lunch? Great, buy me lunch. So for a $15, $10 lunch, we were able to move forward with the call. So I think it's being a little bit flexible, perhaps, in what type of roles, or if they're only working part-time, or have flexibility in their schedule, trying to figure out how to or when to be able to be successful in booking that call. And when I talk about the call, I would say 2% of them were actually phone calls because nobody uses a phone number. Many times it was by email. So if they had emailed a program head or they emailed their career services contact to say, guess what, I got a great job. And that got forwarded to me. Many times the individual that it came through would answer and say, if you don't mind, I'm going to pass this on to alumni relations so that they're aware and to keep our information up to date. So that opened the door for me to then use their information to go to respond back to them. So I would just congratulate them and move forward with the call from there. So it's really important to have and build those relationships with those internal contacts. And again, I think because our students were so tied into these key areas and individuals on campus while they were here as a student, they were excited to reach out and share that information. Or if, as I say, they've been on a judging panel, then whoever coordinated that would send out a thank you to all the judges. Well, they would copy me on that, or they would forward it to me and say, FYI, you know, these 10 people sat on this panel this weekend or whatever was going on. And then I would use that as a segue to thank them and to say, hey, I'd like to meet with you and hear more about your career path. Certainly going through career services, because we have that placement piece, that is a great way to open that door as well. The other area that I work very closely with, and again, we're a very small shop, so it doesn't necessarily work in larger institutions necessarily, but I think there are pieces of the puzzle that could. I work very closely with recruitment. Recruitment's mandate obviously is to bring the students in and confirm their involvement and placement at our institution. Our job at the other end is to keep them in the fold. So we can refer to each other as the bookends and try and keep everyone into the fold as part of the family. So I work really closely with recruitment in the way of and assisting with them as much as I can of bringing alumni to their events. Very common scenario that happens at many institutions. So again, that involvement, that engagement, that ongoing connectivity, not only between the student and alumni, but the various departments to share that information. Otherwise, I think we find we all work in silos. Many times that can happen, and we're not realizing that the sharing of the resources and moving forward can make a huge impact. And what I find with the alumni that are involved, whether it's something going on campus or a recruitment event off campus or alumni reunion or what have you, they're very eager to give back. They're very eager to get involved. They feel their experience. And what's interesting is certainly speaking to the folks that have been out sort of 8, 9, getting on to 10 years now, nobody knew who Guelph-Humber was at that stage. We are one building on the campus of Humber College. So for them to take the risk to come to an institution that they and many others, their parents, didn't know anything about, and know that they made the right decision and have moved forward in their careers, they love to come back and tell that story. And those are the types of questions, if we delve into a little bit more of the call once you get there, what do you talk to these people about? I get them to tell me their story, because the stories are so unique, as they are with everyone's institution. But because we were at that stage a little more obscure, a little bit more unknown, it's amazing for them to tell the story of how they ended up on our doorstep. And I always, customer satisfaction, do you think you made the right decision? Or was it what you had hoped to accomplish and obtain from the institution while you were here? How did that help you move forward as to where you are today and in your career planning and other stages of life? And I like to just roll that out. So I do a lot of listening, and honestly, they do most of the talking after I sort of inform them of who I am and why I'm here. And it's really listening and tuning into who they are, where they're at, what the institution was able to accomplish or give to them, and then what can they give back? What are they interested in? I think the key, as Ryan had mentioned before, was asking what they'd like to see happen. Whether that's for them individually in their role going forward as far as an ambassador or representative for the university, or overall programming. That's one key word I like to use. I've worked in other institutions. We tend to focus on events. And sometimes I think if we get too focused on the word of events have the concept of one-offs. So if we say it worked 1 year, why didn't it work the next? People may be into an event 1 year, but they may not be in the future. But if we start looking at programming, that word to me means more of a lifelong learning concept to it. Even if it is still a fun event, it's part of the programming. So that's something else we're really trying to build on, is not just social events, not just sporting events, but the whole lifelong learning and sharing of information. Education never ends. It doesn't have to happen in a formal classroom, but if they can feel that they're getting something back or out of the institution, even after graduating, that's sort of what's in it for me. Why should I first even meet with you for coffee? Sure, I want to tell you my fun story or exciting story that I was able to accomplish, but beyond that, what's the next? So I really try and listen to their story first, and then see where could they fit. You know, if they say, I would love to come back to class and talk to a class of students, or I'd love to sit on a panel, or I'd love to volunteer, or I'd love to run an event, or whatever it is they tell me that they may or may not be interested in, then I really try and obviously document that, but then keep that in my mind as I'm moving forward, of key individuals that, you know, come to a scenario or event or a program we're trying to develop. Who would be best to survey, have a focus group, and or sit on, you know, some type of a planning committee if that's the stage that you're at. So it's trying to connect those dots, and so that you're not just going on the call for the sake of the call. We all love to report how many calls we were able to make in a week or a month or what have you, but it's the value behind that. And then obviously if there's a dollar component attached to your portfolio, then it's how do I transition that sort of discovery or identification or cultivation stage into solicitation. So whether that's one-on-one, or whether it's letting them know that there's an alumni appeal coming up, or that there's, you know, class giving that can be involved, or homecoming, reunion class giving that's involved in that aspect, some piece of the puzzle so that they are aware that there's that component of giving back. You know, we always hear the time, talent, and treasure. So those are the various aspects that you can sort of play on as you learn more about the individual, of how you can move forward with that relationship building. But then ultimately, if there is a fundraising component to your responsibility and portfolio, how do you then move towards that aspect of it? And then something else, only because being in Toronto, if I tend to go downtown, I try and book, you know, a couple of meetings at least, or 3 meetings, so that I'm not just going down for one and back again. Many times I may be on transit, or I may park my car once and schlep around town, so I don't want to have, you know, a big bag of giveaways. So we do something very simple. It's a Guelph-Humber pin. I can stuff, you know, handfuls of these in my bag and quite easily hand this over as a little token on top of buying them coffee or lunch or something that they wouldn't necessarily have gotten and or seen as a student or even an early alum perhaps on campus. So it's a very small token that I can leave behind and not have to sort of schlep around with a big bag full of other giveaways. So it's setting out afterwards, you know, leaving them with the pin, leaving with them some type of continuous dialogue, conversation moving forward. And then I, you know, I many times will follow up with a thing through email, or if I do have to get their phone number and then a text or something. The other thing that's really tricky, I find, is if the, you know, I'll have access to their email. They may or may not give me their cell. So it's difficult to then follow up with a quick text if I'm running late or if they're running late. I always try and give them my number at least. But it's always trying to get that extra piece of contact information from them as well. Or then when you meet, if they are in an employment situation where you can get their card or something. Because I find it hard to keep in contact or track them down, but they don't read your email either. So if you're responding to confirm the appointment or change the time, you think, have they even read this? You know? Or if they say, well, we could meet at this coffee shop or this coffee shop, I'll confirm. Well, there's no confirmation, so you're just hoping.
Twitter.
Yeah. So it's these types of you know, extra bits of sharing. For example, we went to see someone at their workplace. I thought I had done a very thorough job. I even on Google looked at the street map to see what the building looked like, because I thought, I just have this feeling when you get there, it's going to look like a warehouse, and I'm not going to know where the front door is, kind of thing. So of course, they didn't tell me, you know, check in with reception or something. So it's like, oh great, look, it looks like they've got great big open doors at the front of the building. I get there, it's all glass. There are no doors. It's like, oh great. So of course I text her and I call her and say, okay, I'm up front, you know. She's not looking at her phone. So we eventually connected, but I mean, there's small things like that when you're dealing with young alums, that it's not commonplace for them to check their email every 2 minutes, like us in an office necessarily would do if they're not sitting, again, they may not be in a role that's a professional, 9 to 5 at a desk type scenario. So those are lessons learned as far as Ryan was saying, as far as failures, as how to connect with these folks when you're on the road kind of scenario, and make sure that you do end up connecting. So that's sort of the experience that we've had at Guelph-Humber, that really allowing them to share their information, reconnect with them, get them to reconnect with the institution, update their information. I would say 90% of the time we don't have any of their information that I've then received, whether it's an email, a cell phone, or both, or even that they just got this new job. They've only told their department head or student services or career services or something, and luckily it's been funneled to us. So it's a great opportunity for us to update our records as well. But it really allows me to see where they're at and where we're going forward. And I think it's really important to make that connection as much as possible, as we all know, because I think the more they feel connected and the more they can tell their story and their excitement of where they're going and where they're at, the more likely they're obviously to stay connected with us or get back into the fold. And then of course they just act as an ambassador. As they're telling me their story, it's something just unbelievable of how they ended up on our doorstep, or how they ended up at the job they were at from their education. First thing I ask them is, would you be willing to share this? So again, whether that's coming back to the classroom or tell a story at a reunion or online or an informal mentorship type scenario. And they're 9 times out of 10 willing to continue telling their story or helping others. Many times people have said, you know what, if so-and-so didn't help me to make the choice of where I am today, whether that's picking that educational component and or helping them in their career path, I would never be where I am today. So I am more than willing to pay it forward to others. So it's great to hear that that inspiration and that gratitude that they have for their educational experience. And I'm going to leave with one example, and I'm sure many institutions find this as well. There's obviously a lot of overlap between, especially in a small institution like Guelph-Humber, student services and alumni services. So in past experience, there's other institutions I've worked at where we literally have backed it up and senior students become future alumni. We literally have given them those titles so that before they get out the door, they know, first of all, what does the word alumni even mean? Second of all, what they can expect in the future as far as being an alum. And that they play a role, whether it's formal or informal, in future planning, whether it's for reunions or homecomings or events for them that they will soon experience, obviously, if they're on their way out the door to join that alumni family. So this year we really wanted to look at how can we incorporate that kind of future alumni aspect into happenings at Guelph-Humber. So what we came up with was a fun idea to engage, really be open to all the students, but obviously we're focusing on the senior student aspect of education, and not to overwhelm the new students that are just coming in, trying to figure everything else out in life. But we're really looking at the whole future alumni aspect. So for 2 days on campus, just after orientation, when things are just starting to settle in, we're putting together what's called the Future Alumni Club. And it's literally a club atmosphere. So it's a really fun way to engage the students, have them come into, we have an art gallery in our atrium, which is a fantastic space. So we're literally going to transform that into a club where they come in, it's like they're a member of, a part of this club, and we've got all kinds of different activities where we can engage these students and educate them on the concept of what alumni is all about. So they're going to sign banners for the graduating year, so that flash forward, however many years it is when they graduate, 1, 2, 3, 4 years out, that banner can then come back out. We're going to have little trivia contests with questions or information with respect to what is alumni services all about. So they fill out those ballots, they can win a prize. Very small, very low key, but hopefully the concept behind that is to inform and educate those senior students in particular, but really any year is invited, on what alumni services is all about. And then we'll also introduce the concept of mentorship. So we'll have some alumni hopefully present But if not, at least they can sign up, the students can sign up to be connected with alumni as a mentor. So we're hoping to be able to hit a number of key learning opportunities, if you will, with that student population throughout these 2 days, and just making it fun and planting those seeds so that we don't wait till they're out the door to try and then educate them. We have been involved in events in the past, whether it's Grad Fest or last lecture, which is great. But I literally had people come up to me in 4th year and said, what does that, I don't even know what that word means. And rightly so, you're a student, you're a student. You don't think necessarily ahead to the day across the stage, you're suddenly an alum. What exactly is all that about? So there are great opportunities and touch points throughout the year that we can educate that constituency group a little bit further and in a fun, engaging way. So that'll sort of roll things out starting in September, and then we will build with programs and educational outreach and opportunities up until next spring when we'll have our first 10-year reunion. So that sort of gives you an overall picture of how we, again, we're a little bit unique, but I hope there's some takeaways there that even bigger institutions can use, and how to sort of streamline and focus in on not only making the call, but what to try and gather or give back in that call, and then next steps moving forward on how to continue to engage those alums in whatever sort of piece of the puzzle that makes sense with respect to what stage they're at. It's interesting with I don't know if it's common with all young alums, but I certainly found in some situations, if they've only been out sort of 3 or 4 years, they don't feel like they've accomplished enough to be able to give back or share their experience. And I encourage them that, of course, for our 1st or 2nd or 3rd year student, connecting with any alum is a great opportunity. And just sharing their journey in those early years, I think, is very important. I also found it's interesting, and maybe others have found this as well, that they find they're excited about their first job. They're happy, I think, that they've chosen it and that they've gotten it. But at one point, though, they still feel like they sold out slightly because the job market is so competitive. They're just not sure if they really should have taken that job. So they're really, as much as they're looked upon as alum and they're have it all together, they're looking to the institution for guidance as well. We're really lucky that our career services are for life. So I always encourage these people to take advantage of that, even if they're in a position but they're apprehensive, or it's a contract, they're not sure how long it's going to last. You can feel that apprehension in the air, even though they're very excited. And I think that will continue in their career path as time goes on until things settle for them. But that they can take advantage of that opportunity internally as well to come back for some guidance or tweaking of the resume or just a conversation on what the job market is like out there. So I think there's opportunities that we can present to them, and then hopefully there's opportunities that they can present back to us, and we can have a meeting of the minds of how we can work together. And really it's, I think, I've always said it's presenting the opportunities that are available in your institution and then finding the right fit at what stage they are at in their career and in their lives as far as how we can work together going forward. So I think I'll leave it there. If there's questions, happy to answer any. No questions?
All good?
All right.
All right, thanks, Marlene.
I was just going to ask, typically for your graduates, do they have a very high employment rate?
They do actually, yes. So Lori can talk to some statistics. We do a grad survey every 2 years.
Yeah, so we're actually, we just closed the 2015 survey last weekend, so I'm in the process of analyzing the results, our most recent results, but based on our 2013 figures, we were looking at employment rates right around 90%, which is higher than the average employment, we've been told, so pretty good.
Well, just with that very specific educational experience, I would imagine that they work that hard, it hopefully would translate into employment, but yeah.
Yeah, we also have we probably have about 17%, I think 17% is accurate, of our grads do continue on to postgraduate education of some sort or form. So it's a fairly high figure for that as well. We do get to measure those statistics.
And I think that placement component really feeds into that career placement as well, as far as finding opportunities. If not their placement actually turning into employment, then certainly opening doors. So, yeah, they're well positioned when they,
For your placement, is it you that institution finds the placement, or is it me, myself, as a student would have to find it for myself?
right, so the question was, does the institution find the placement for the student, or is it up to the student themselves to find that placement? And I'd say it's a combination thereof. Our career placement coordinators work extremely hard in placing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of positions each year, as you can imagine, because it's a mandatory requirement for these 7 programs. But it certainly is a dual effort that if the student has a lead, or especially I would think, and Laura may be able to answer to this as well, is that if the student has a very sort of unique desire to work in a particular area, then obviously there may need to be some assistance there, as opposed to more of a general position that we have a history with.
Yeah, some of our programs rely more heavily on the placement department than others. I think our business program, most of the students end up going and finding those placements on their own. They're only required to do 100 hours over their final year. But some of the programs like psychology and kinesiology are very specific in what kinds of placements they can get. And so our placement coordinators really help to make those connections with the institutions they work with.
So are they alumni of Guelph-Humber, or are they alumni of University of Guelph or Humber College?
Good question.
We are actually a separate entity on our own, but we are not a legal entity. So we do not, in other words, the degree and the diploma come from our 2 partners, if you will, but we are a university of our own. So we strongly encourage, when people are advertising themselves as far as where their credentials came from, that it's the University of Guelph-Humber. And Laura can attest to this as far as LinkedIn. A lot of people will list those separately. They'll say, I have a degree from Guelph, University of Guelph, and I have a diploma from Humber. And it makes our job very difficult if we're trying to find people, because with LinkedIn, if it's not the exact institutional name, if we Google Guelph, we get all of Guelph, as opposed to Guelph-Humber. So we strongly, and career services as well, when they're writing their resumes and such, really strongly encourages that. And I could tell you lots of anecdotal stories on the pros and cons. Some early grads, when people didn't know what that institution was, would default to Guelph, because everybody knows Guelph and they're very proud of that degree. And especially depending on what circumstance or what type of interview they were going to, if they felt the degree had more weight or emphasis or whatever their opinions were, they would just simply say, or even literally say on their resume, University of Guelph. If they were going into a scenario and a discussion or an interview with respect to where the diploma had more weight or caliber or cachet, they would talk about Humber College. I think over the years, and we're certainly still working hard on that, is to talk about the University of Guelph-Humber. And I always say to people, don't think about it, not that might put you at the bottom of the pile, because people don't know what that is. Think about it, they'll put you at the top of the pile, because they'll think, what the heck is the University of Guelph-Humber? And there's a great segue to talk about your fantastic institution and education, whether that's in a networking scenario or literally in an interview. So we're hoping we're moving more in that direction, but that's a great question.
Marlene, there was just one question from Twitter, but it's just a quick one. Do you ask for a gift on the first visit with young alumni consistently?
No.
So consistently
No, because we haven't had any history there with respect to asking or soliciting. And me being new as well, I don't show up, hi, I'm so-and-so, let me tell you my story. By the way, can you write me a check when you're sitting here? I mean, that's not my philosophy as far as my past experience. I think, as I say, we've got to go through those steps. But certainly I will talk about, reunion or our 10-year reunion coming up next year and how important, and we're moving towards that. Or whether, we have an alumni appeal coming up in the fall. Actually, we have a number of alums who are staff. So for the first year, this year, we're looking at doing a faculty staff campaign. So there's opportunities to open that door and to talk about it, but I certainly don't solicit straight out on the first ask. Yes?
Do Guelph or Humber solicit any grads, or do you find it to the institutions instead of yours?
Can you just repeat that?
Yes, so the question was, does the University of Guelph or Humber College solicit our grads? Is that right?
Yes.
So that's a great question.
It's an ongoing challenge we're handling, we're trying to.
It's data management, right? Because interestingly enough, not only does our degree come from the University of Guelph, but all of our receiving does, because we're not a legal entity on our own. So all of our data is in their database, but we look at segmenting. Is that 100% foolproof? No, absolutely not. But the ideal scenario is that we solicit our own, whether that's alumni or faculty staff or corporate connections or whatever constituent groups you're looking at.
All right, I think we're out of time, so thank you, Marlene.